Today is cleanup day as far as the Polycrub is concerned, and also planting day. And here at the end of this bed, I've got lots of different green vegetables that I planted at the end of last year, so in the autumn. And they have been giving us some brilliant harvests of spinach and lettuce and rocket and chard. Just this little area here was enough to keep us in plenty of greens. But the spinach is bolting, the lettuce and the chard are looking worse for wear, and I need this space for summer crops. I've started planting some of them. The tomatoes on this far side are in, and we'll have a look at them in a second. But I've got a couple more plants to go in, tomato plants. The eggplant, the peppers, the loofah, and the sweet potatoes need to go in as well. And I thought I would also give you an update on how the Olla watering system is coming along. This front bed is now clear. The smaller plants like the lettuce and the spinach, I just pulled or twisted and pulled and brought those up. And they are waiting in the kitchen for me to go through them and harvest the leaves. The chard, which was here at the corner, I used my hori knife just to cut it at the base, and you can see the stump still there. And I did that because it has lots of roots down there, and there are worms and all kinds of little critters that are living around them, so I'm leaving that intact for it to break down. And we'll be replanting this later on in the video. This raised bed on the far right, which I showed you how to build a couple of years ago, is now filled with my larger tomato varieties, mainly beefsteak. I absolutely love black crim. So I've got 3 black crim here. And then I've also put in some ananas noir, costoluto fiorentino, and I think there's another variety in here as well. But basically these are all of my large tomatoes, and they are growing up strings that attach to bamboo canes right up here at the top, just like I've grown them the past couple of years. The only difference is that I'm now using a synthetic string instead of natural, because the natural string has a tendency to kind of rot at the soil surface because it's natural, and then the entire plant goes flopping over, which isn't great. I have cauliflower and broccoli out in the garden. It did not fare as well as these here under cover. But the idea is that it is so much warmer in here that by planting my brassicas in the Polycrub over the winter, they had a much more protected spot to thrive. It is warm in here, over 30 Celsius at the moment. So these plants think that we're much further south. And so they are producing far earlier than they would have done out in the garden. The raised bed on the far left is where I'll be growing the sweet potatoes again this year, some peppers, and some more eggplants. It's completely empty right now, except for these terracotta cups here in the middle. This is my watering system, believe it or not, and I introduced it last year, and it has been brilliant in helping to keep my plants watered using no electricity and the power of just a water reservoir and gravity. This is where the water gets filled. And I do have plans to get it hooked up to rainwater, but right now I just use the hose, and it drip feeds water down the line and into those cups, which are buried in the soil here. And because terracotta is porous, the water that is held inside the cup will leach through this material. It will get damp to the touch on the outside. And that means that plants can grow their roots right up to the pot and suck moisture from it. One of the first things that I need to do today is rebury all of these Olla cups. And if you want to learn a little bit more about them, I'll leave a link on the screen and in the video caption. And I can also offer you 10% off of these with the code LOVELYGREENS. They ship to the UK, but they're mainly a US supplier. And again, this is a really good watering system, especially since our summers are tending to get drier and hotter, and our plants and crops are just getting more and more stressed out, and so are we with having to manually water. First, I harvested the cauliflower, and because the stem is so tough, I decided to just twist and pull it out. And that lovely homegrown cauliflower is going to make a fantastic curry tomorrow night, especially with the leaves that I just harvested. Chard and cauliflower make a lovely curry. Now in the far bed, I managed to get all of the Olla cups in, and they're all sitting flush with the top of the soil. And now what I'm going to be doing is going through all of the seedlings that I have over in the far corner, and I'm going to set all of those young plants out in this bed. And then when I'm happy with the layout of where everything is going to live, I'll dig them in. And now it's time to plant the last thing, which is a tomato. And I just want to go through this once again, the method that I use. This string is connected up here to the top, and this is where the plant is going to grow. All you need is a string, because all you do is wind the plant around the string as it grows. And as far as the planting hole and putting this in, you just put it underneath the plant. And then as the plant grows, the roots will get entangled with the string and secure it into place. I've also put fishbone and blood in the planting hole of this tomato because it also is a heavy feeder, and it helps to just replenish the nutrients that were lost last year. Let's have a look at how everything has turned out now that I've planted all of the plants that I'm going to be doing today. We have the tomato here front and center that we've just planted. It is connected to the ceiling way up there with a string. Over here we have 3 sweet potatoes. I've just gone with 3 this year, and they will be climbing again up this trellis. And if you are growing sweet potatoes under cover in a milder climate like mine, definitely check out my video on how to grow them vertically, because it can increase your harvest and your yield. I've left a little bit of a gap between them and the 3 peppers. And then on the far end here, I have 5 eggplant or aubergines, and they too have strings. Even though they don't grow as tall as indeterminate tomatoes, they'll really use that support when they are laden with fruit a little bit later on in the season. I'm growing 1 loofah plant this year, and I've put it here at the end of the middle bed, and it will grow really tall and produce these amazing fruit, which you can use as a natural sponge. And then of course down here we have the tomatoes that I planted earlier, and they're much larger because they've been in the soil for longer. And I grew tomatoes in this bed 2 years ago, and they're back, and eventually they will climb up their strings and overhang this area. It will be an absolute jungle in here before long. These are the melons and cucumbers that I'm going to be planting here in the Polycrub. Some of them I need to make hard decisions on which one to keep and which one to cull, and others I'm going to pot on. And they're a good size now, but they do probably need to stay in their pots for another couple of weeks before I plant them out. And there are probably more plants here than I can actually fit here inside the Polycrub. So some of these I'm going to be planting into the greenhouse. In my most recent update video, where I sat down and spoke to you about plans for the channel and what I'd like to show you this year, I announced that I'm going to be sharing a lot more container gardening and small space gardening ideas this year. And so planting these in the greenhouse, which is a much more attainable indoor growing space for people with smaller gardens, and then comparing them against what I'm growing here in the Polycrub will be something that we'll look at later on in the year. And if you haven't caught my most recent video on how to make a DIY self-watering planter, you can watch that next. I'll be back next week, so that's right, 2 videos in a row. And in that video, we're gonna have a full look at the garden in May. We're gonna check back on the plants here in the Polycrub. We're gonna look at the greenhouse and the deck and the entire outdoor vegetable garden. So I will see you next week for that video. Looking forward to it. Bye for now.